This is a demo of Kandinsky, a Max for Live device I created that lets you redefine sequences as a 12-tone row. Before I get into the device itself, let me just show you what I have on the session. So I just have one MIDI track with my Max for Live device, which is turned off for now. Then I have just a piano instrument, a felt piano, which I just got from Spitfire, which I find really great. And then after that, I just have a limiter. So let's go ahead and turn Kandinsky on. Well, first let's hear the piano by itself. So let me turn Kandinsky on and show you the interface. Kandinsky is divided into a couple of different sections. The main section is the matrix itself, which takes a good chunk of the window on the left. We define this matrix by various parameters that we have on the top left and by clicking Learn. So the way that the MIDI input behaves depends whether you have Learn turned on or whether you are in play mode. On the right, we have a little map that tells you what MIDI notes you're playing and what they are doing. So when you're in play mode, the first, we'll go over the details soon, but then below that, you have a section where you can store your different matrix configurations. And then after that, we have a processing section that allows you to modify your series so that you can play chords. So you could play chords by 2, by 3, by 4, etc. And then you have 8 various user configurations where you can create your own chords or remangling of the row itself. And then below that, you can choose to transpose each note from that row. And then at the very bottom, we have just a monitor that is telling us in a more musical way what the row is. On the top right corner, we have a general area where we can save all of our configurations. If we made changes on our user settings, if we store a number of rows, etc., all of that can be saved as a file that you can call up later. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over each area of Kandinsky. We're going to start with the defining section. So we have a number of buttons here, 0 through 9, A and B, which really stand for 10 and 11. So the series goes from 0 to 11. We have a couple of very important buttons. The play button versus the learn button. So that has to be on when we want to define a sequence. The reset button is an important one also. So if we make any mistake and we click on the reset button, everything is zeroed out, and the row itself is sort of normalized to a straight numerical sequence, 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. The blue area tells us what step we're on and what value has been submitted, and you can slide across the row like this, or it can be done automatically. You can enter numbers by typing here. You can type on your keyboard, or you can play your MIDI keyboard, and then any note that is a C note or a C sharp or a D, etc., will correspond to 0 through 11. 0 being C, 1 being C sharp, 2 being D, etc. So let's go ahead and do a couple of examples. So first, we have to toggle this button to learn. And then I'm going to, for example, do the sequence backwards. So I hit B, A, 9, 8, 7, etc. And as you can see, these numbers are reflected here. And right now we just hit 6. It moved over to the next step. So I can go on. Hit 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then obviously the last one, 0. And this will just sort of keep looping as we go. So if I say go to the number 8 and I want to change that, the fourth step, and make it a 4, then all the numbers here will be reshuffled and the sequence so I inserted the number 4 here, and the sequence that we had afterwards was shifted over to wherever the number 4 was before. I could just reset this and just type in the number, so I could just do B A 987654321 0. So that's one way to do it. Or I could just play my keyboard, and now I'm just going to play a random sequence of notes. So whenever you're finished with your sequence, just to make sure that it's okay, you turn the learning or the definition off by toggling the play learn button back onto play mode. If you want to store the sequence, well, I have a couple of sequences already stored in the first couple of slots, but you can store it on any slot. So I use these slots here. Let's just start on 20, for example, and I'll hit store, right? If I go back to 0, I can just recall 0, and then so 0 is just a straight line. Number 1 has a straight. Number 2 has a special sequence. Number 3, there you go, has a couple of different sequences already there. So you have up to 99 slots that you can save and recall at your will. Or you can also randomize your sequence. So that's so much for defining the row, which will always show up here. Then, once this row is defined, automatically the whole matrix is created for you. And then you can call up any one of these rows by clicking on the appropriate inversion, retrograde, etc. So, for example, if I choose, say, this fifth slot here, retrograde inversion, starting with a number 2, but obviously it's retrograde, so we start from the bottom up. These numbers will be laid out in a more readable sense on the right side of your window. All of these buttons, well, we can click on them, or you can manipulate all of that via MIDI. So the A section, which is your lower octave, these 4 notes define what row you're going to choose. So the white keys are the straight, the primaries, or the retrogrades. The black keys are the inversions and the retrograde inversions. And then the octave itself chooses the row in order. So row 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever inversion it is, it's just going to go straight. So C on the second octave is the first inversion, C sharp is the second inversion, D is the third, like that. For example, if I hit the D, then that means that I'm going to choose the retrograde side, the straight retrograde side. And then when I hit the next octave on so I hit C, that chooses the first retrograde, C sharp, the second, third, etc., like that. Then the next octave up will basically control this drop-down menu here. Once we choose the retrograde, the first option here is to play the sequence straight through. In this case, it's backwards down to 0, so it's 10, 4, 11, etc. So when I play the last octave here, this octave corresponds to the actual notes that are going to be played, which are this A sharp, E, B, A, etc. Now let's try the first retrograde. So I'll just hit C on this second octave. I'll hit C on the second octave. And let's check that one out. you can choose to play the sequence straight, or you can group the series in chords of 2 or intervals, or 3 or 4. And then if you want to do bigger chords, then you can choose any one of these users here to modify them. So let's just play them first. Now let's hear the triads. Or tetrachords. And then if I go, say, to user 1, let's see what we have here. It's doing some remangling of the whole series in a different order. So, for example, if I wanted to create a chord of 6 notes and then play straight, that's pretty easy to do. Now let's hear what that sounds like. And then obviously you can play around with different configurations. So in this case, we're going to do a chord with the first item on the row and whatever, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the 9th is going to make a chord out of that. Now, just so you know, all the settings are automatically saved in here. So whatever modification, let's say, for example, I'm going to make a chord on the last note here of the first 3. And then, so that's on user 1. I go back to user, some other user preference. And if I go back to user 1, that whatever change I made in the last moment, the last time I was on this user, that gets automatically saved. So let's go ahead and go back to a straight row and then show you the transposition. So each note on the row can be transposed, I think it's what, 1, 2, 3, 4 octaves down or up or down. So I'm just going to do some random sequence here, and let's hear that. So the octave configurations are saved with every slot. However, slots 1 through 4, I cannot edit those. Those will always remain in that sort of straight configuration. So 1 to 1, or play chords by 2, by 3, by 4. And then whatever settings I have, say I have this setting here on user 1, on user 2, I want to do, so let's say my first row, I want to keep it pure, but then on my second user, I also have a straight row, but then I want to play around with the transpositions. And then, so this setting was stored. Let's just do a couple of transpositions here too. Number 2 also has a setting. All of that can be saved as a file. So the file that you will be saving stores your user configurations, but also whatever rows you choose to store as your bank of rows. So all of that information gets saved with your file. So this is my first row set, and then it's a special sort of max dictionary. So that's it. I hope you find this useful.